order of events here. I started trying to get things organized in the church, started getting things organized in my home, and then I started getting things organized with our business. Has it been smooth? No. Has it been easy? No. But I really, truly believe that if you want to see some sort of fruit from your actions, it's going to start with So today, I wanted to talk to you about getting yourself organized after having been laid off. And what that looks like leading into getting a job. And basically just organization in general when it comes to your business, your brand. Maybe you are out of the workforce and you're trying to start something of your own. Something that I have kind of like a knack in. I guess it's kind of like one of those little I guess it's a gift, you could call it. And that is being able to create organization and then create action out of that organization, almost no matter what the situation may be or circumstances, tools being used, whatever. I've really begun tapping into that. I'm very committed to my church in that I believe you put God first, everything else follows after. That's my personal belief. I know some of you might think I'm crazy, but it's fine. And I practice that as a standard in my life. And after having been laid off, I realized that I need to make that more of a priority because I was kind of like, I guess you could say I was just riding the fence. I was half in, half out in that, I knew what I could do based on what I know my skill sets are, but I wasn't doing them for the church. I was doing them sort of for my job. I was doing them sort of for my household. I was doing them sort of for clients or people that I was doing business with, but I wasn't really applying it to the church. And after I'd gotten laid off, I started realizing, first of all, I had a lot of extra time on my hands and I was starting to get bored really quick. But I was realizing that my skill sets and my gifts should be applied to what God has for me first. And then I prioritize everything after that. And it's really allowed certain skills of mine to come out that I didn't even know were as strong as they are. It's kind of funny. And so with that, I wanted to talk to you if you're in a similar situation, if you've been laid off, or if you've just kind of found yourself in this sort of lull kind of state in your life where you're it's dang man, I'm not super thrilled with where I'm at. I feel kind of just stuck. Then this podcast is for you. What's the first thing that I did to start getting myself into this place? Well, first thing that I did was, like I said, I prioritized God. So I put God first. I committed extra time to my church, to projects at the church. I decided, you know what, I got to start digging in deeper. So I would go to the church. I would work on projects at the church. I'm a little techie, so I would work on some of the tech stuff at the church. I would go over and clean. I would go over and organize things that I knew hadn't been touched and needed organized. I started brainstorming things that I know people apply to their businesses, and I'm like, what if we applied that to the church? How could that help grow or spread the message of Christ? So I started applying the concept of, brainstorming ideas of, okay, how do we build the social media? How do we perfect this? How do we get into this? And interestingly enough, our elder had already had this in mind, or he was already starting to go after this. And after a few conversations, we all started coming together as a team, me and a few other people, to really engage on this pursuit of pushing the church forward like it's a business. And I believe that if every other church who is truly preaching the true word of God, if you were to take your business mindsets and apply it to moving the church forward, not necessarily turning it into a business, but just applying some of those same practices, I think it would help a lot with a lot of y'all's churches in terms of organization and structure. But I'm not going to talk about that right now. Coming back to what I was talking about. I really started honing in on this. And after honing in on it for the church, I'm like, I got to do this for my house. And so my husband and I started getting ourselves organized. Bills. I reworked a finance spreadsheet that I had made for us like 2 or 3 years ago. But I dove into it and I reworked it. I figured out all the numbers. I got us current in terms of like what we owe where or commitments we have, whatever the case is. And then I started looking at my house and I'm like, okay, that closet needs cleaned. I haven't touched that closet since we moved in. You know, like little side projects that I'd been putting off for ages, I started trying to work on. I completely reorganized my office because I'm like, you know, time for a new face, right? And I started organizing myself in all those different little ways in my home. So it started with church, and then I realized I need to do this with my home. And then after doing it with my home, I'm like, I want to start doing this with my business. Now, I don't have like a super thriving business. I'm like every other entrepreneur out there. You start off little, and you just got to keep pushing through until something breaks loose, right? And that's where I'm at. I have a couple different things that I'm doing. Like I do branding. I do a little bit of social media on one side of things. Sorry. I was running a test with setting up my camera in my car, and now it kind of got a little crooked. It was straight, so I apologize. So I have a little bit of a branding business. I was getting into like real estate photography and videography. My husband has a home inspection business, so I was trying to get things built out for him for social media. And so I was thinking, okay, again, order of events here. I started trying to get things organized in the church, started getting things organized in my home, and then I started getting things organized with our business. Has it been smooth? No. Has it been easy? No. But I really, truly believe that if you want to see some sort of fruit from your actions, it's going to start with structure and organization. And not just winging it. You know, for a time in my life, I was like, I'll just wing it. You know, YOLO. And it hasn't worked. It does not work. At least not from my experience. Some of you out there who wing it and it works, that's because you have some sort of foundation behind you that either started before you or it started and you just don't acknowledge whoever it is that is creating that foundation. Because you just don't wing success. You don't wing substance, you know, true original substance. I wanted to create the organization and structure. I'm still working on it for our businesses, believe it or not. It's been baby steps because things just don't happen overnight, you know, and I'm one of those people that I used to be so very impatient. And so I would like want to get all the business stuff done in one day and I'd stress myself out. And I've learned, getting a little bit older, I hate saying that. I'm in my 30s, okay? But I'm after like going through life periods, or after going through periods in my life, I have learned that it's okay to work on things slowly so long as you remain consistent. If you work on it slowly and you're not consistent, you're never going to get it. You're not going to get anything done. It's just a fact. But if you work on it slowly but consistently, you'll see progress more so than if you work on it speedily and consistently. Because progress is also about accuracy. It's not just about getting it done, it's about getting it done right. And that's where I've been finding myself, is trying to find that correct balance. So getting things done right, and making sure that it's something that does not foundationally fall apart in the future. Or it's going to take a lot for it to break apart, basically. So some little tricks and tips I guess I could give you. I'm a spreadsheet person. I think it just comes from my background in corporate HR, from working in the government. It's more corporate HR though. And I've built spreadsheets for a lot of different things. I've built spreadsheets for my husband and my finances. I've built several different types of spreadsheets for our church, for project tracking. I have built spreadsheets for our businesses when it comes to social media tracking. You know, I have a lot of these spreadsheets because they're just basically glorified checklists for me. And they help me see historically and presently and then future, you know, what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. On top of that, I've had to acknowledge that were you ever one of those kids back in the 90s, now that I'm dating myself, where you were terrified of calling anybody? Like your mom, if you wanted to order pizza, your mom would be like, look up the number of the pizza place in the phone book and call and order pizza. I was terrified of speaking to people. I don't know why. I really have no idea where that came from. Like, it must be buried somewhere in my subconscious, because I have no memory as to why I was so terrified of speaking to people over the phone. But I was. And it would be a battle. An absolute battle. And I would try to figure out every little which way not to have to call somebody on the phone. Moving forward through life, I would communicate when I would have to. I still was not one to really like communicating, because maybe it tied in with some sort of feeling of rejection, possibly, because I didn't like feeling rejected for my ideas or what I was saying. That was like middle school, high school era, because I was bullied too. I mean, what kid doesn't go through some form of bullying? Or you're either bullied or you're the bully. It's one of the two. So moving past into college, I started learning how to speak up a little bit more for myself, because at that point I'm on my own, right? And I did. I had to learn how to be a leader. I had to learn more so how to communicate my ideas and concepts and not fear rejection. And that really brought out a lot of different skills in me that were very raw, right? And then moving out of college into adult life and a professional job, I had to go through it even more. And over the years, I've learned that communication is key. And now I look at myself and what I do, and I actually like communicating, because a lot of people don't like to face the facts, and they don't like to hear the truth, and they don't value the necessary or they don't value the need to not only clearly communicate, but to clearly communicate with a level of accuracy. And so going through this journey, I believe in your life or where you're at now, whether it's a layoff, you got fired, you're trying to build your business, you're just trying to get a stable foundation in your home, whatever the case is, you need to face the facts and face the reality of communication. And what I mean in that is not only being able to communicate to people, but also being able to communicate to yourself. What does that look like? Admitting when you're struggling. Admitting when you want to say you're good at something, but you're not. Admitting that something is messy and just being honest with yourself, like, I got to get this fixed. Taking that communication to the next step of prioritizing action. And that's the hard part, because a lot of people can talk a really good game, but at the end of the day, talking the game has nothing to do with the actual scoreboard, right? It's when you get on the court, it's when you get on the field, and it's when you take action. And you have to determine, are you going to be the offense or the defense? Because lack, or in this analogy, inaction is a form of, I'm just going to ease off. I'm not going to pass the ball. I'm not going to acknowledge that I need to fix something. I'm going to more play defense to make it look like I'm doing something. And then I'm just going to kind of like let it go. Inaction produces a result, but it's a result of failure. It's a result of lack of productivity. It's a result of a lack of responsibility. And then that changes your character. And if people get to know you based on that, they get to know a person whose character is not upstanding, or it's not up to par. So in getting yourself organized, you got to face the facts about yourself. You got to acknowledge what you need to fix, because as you begin taking baby steps in fixing those little things, your character changes for the positive. So it not only can change for the negative if you have inactivity and if you just talk a game, but it can change for the positive if you have activity, if you take action, if you prioritize what you know needs to be done in order to make yourself a better human. Because that's what life is all about. It's a race. Biblically, this is a race. Biblically, this is a journey where in this race, a true race requires taking care of yourself. It requires bettering yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually. It requires planning. It requires strategic initiative. And in order to get yourself from point A to point B, it's all about the prioritization of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So we talked about the negative side of character and how that is caused by the inactivity. If you are active and actually taking these things to heart and producing action in a consistent manner, doesn't have to be fast, but it needs to be consistent, then your character is going to change with that. And people are going to see that. And people are going to be like, hey, she's more trustworthy. Or, hey, he's more reliable. Hey, I can go to him now. And they're going to see this transformation where all of a sudden you're going to have people relying on you for things, and it's going to feel good. It's like when you lose weight. You lose those first 5 pounds, you're like, yeah, I got this, and it's just a water weight, but it's still weight, right? It's the same thing with your character and taking activity on all the little things, because eventually the little things will begin to add up. And that's something that I've done over the last few months is I had to take a period of like detox from my previous job, because it was truly a blessing in disguise. It was hard. Like those few months, it was a little tough, stress wise. But at the same time, like I had to keep rebuking that, right? And I'm like, this is my period of making myself better for whatever comes next. And so that's what I did. I started working on myself, more so in the terms of prioritization, responsibilities, my home. And now I'm going to a full-time job that I was able to get, but I have a different perspective on what I want to do and how I want to do it. And on top of that, there's people now that are relying on me more than what they did before I was laid off. So my whole perspective has changed, I would say drastically, in terms of life, career goals, business goals, how I feel about the church, how I feel about my family. A lot of different moving pieces where my perspective has changed for the better. your goal should be to take action, prioritize, and then be consistent. And I think at some point early on in this podcast, I was talking about tools or little tricks. So I've set up basically the playing field for you. All right, what you really need to do. And I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be easy. I'm not going to tell you that taking action, I'm not telling you that acknowledging your faults or acknowledging things that you want to think were great, but they're really not. Everything can improve. Everything can improve. I'm just going to emphasize, I can't emphasize that enough. It doesn't matter if your finances are good now, they could be great. It doesn't matter if your home is perfect now, it could be outstandingly perfect. And I think there's got to be a balance too. So I'm getting excited about what I'm talking about, but there's got to be a balance. The balance is there's a certain level of contentment that you need to have in life. All right. For me, I'm content with knowing that I can have faith that every single day God is providing. Whether it's through my job, whether it's through a client, whether it's through this podcast, whatever the case may be. My contentment rests in the Lord. However, keeping that level-headed sense of contentment, I also have a drive, okay? And that's part of this race. My drive is to continue being better, all right? Being better in the job that I have for a season. Being better in the business that I have for a season. Being better in who I am now. Because everything is about stepping stones. At least for me it has been. And each stepping stone always leads to a better step. Sometimes there's been downfalls, but that's been because of my own doing or because the Lord is trying to perfect me even more. And that's where my faith and contentment have to come back in, and I have to make sure to check myself, right? So you need to put yourself in a place of contentment, but in that contentment, be like, okay, now it's time to make this better. And I'm not saying suddenly be like, oh, I'm content with my $1 million life. Now let me strive to be a billionaire. And you just go ham crazy and you drop everything else in life and that's all you pursue. That's not what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is the contentment comes with the balance in your life. So you've balanced your life out. You've prioritized yourself. You've fixed problems. You've perfected what were issues. Now, finding that balance, you've now reached, I'm content. I am making sure I've prioritized and balanced my life. This is my level of contentment. I'm happy. This is good. And then you go from that step and you're like, okay, in maintaining this balance, now I can push forward to pursue bigger and better things, but I cannot leave this level set of balance. Because once you leave the balance, that's where you're starting to reprioritize and reshift. And that reshifting is what could lead to trouble. Because it could lead to pride, it could lead to greed, it could lead to coveting. You know, there's so many different things it could change and morph into. Because the devil, he's a liar, right? The devil's a liar. But he's also tricky. And he could change what you know as your level set of balance and contentment and prioritization. And he can quickly flip it into something that turns out to be a big problem. And it's hard. You know, I've learned this over the last few months, and it's hard to keep that balance. It is. You know, it's a struggle with the physical man every single day for me. But having the Holy Spirit and knowing where I'm at in my life and where I want to stay in my life, I also know that, okay, it's okay to have goals. It's okay to have pursuits. But I got to keep myself in check. I got to be in the Word. I got to be faithful to my prioritization of God first, and then everything else falls after that.